The storm had passed, but the sea still whispered of its fury. Waves lapped softly against the hull of the black ship, their rhythmic touch sounding almost like the slow beating of a heart that refused to die. Dawn crept timidly over the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of violet and gray. The scent of salt, gunpowder, and burnt oil hung in the air. Jace stood on the deck, cigarette dangling between his lips, his coat whipping in the cold wind. The storm had taken its toll, 3 crewmen injured, 1 missing, the radar fried, and the cargo hold half flooded. He ran a hand over the railing, feeling the ship's old metal skin beneath his glove. She had survived worse, but every time, the scars grew deeper. Behind him, the sound of boots echoed, Captain Ray's boots. He didn't have to turn around to know it was her. There was a weight to her footsteps, a kind of command that didn't need words. She moved like someone who'd walked through too many battles and refused to let any of them claim her. Morning, Jace muttered without looking. Rhea stopped beside him, staring out at the pale light spreading across the ocean. Her hair was still damp, her long coat streaked with salt. "If you can call it that," she said. Her voice was low, calm, but threaded with exhaustion. "Report. Engines holding steady. Radar's toast, though. We'll need new parts. Add it to the list." He exhaled smoke and squinted toward the horizon. "You ever get tired of fixing the same ship just to break it again?" Ray's eyes flicked toward him. "You ever get tired of breathing?" That was her way, sharp, unflinching. Jace smirked but didn't answer. He respected her more than anyone alive, but sometimes he wondered if there was anything left of her beneath that armor of discipline. The silence between them was broken by the screech of metal, the door to the captain's quarters opening behind them. Rhea turned. Inside, her command table was covered in hollow maps, data drives, and sealed envelopes marked with corporate sigils. She stepped in, motioning for Jace to follow. He hesitated at the doorway, glancing at the framed photo on the wall, a younger Rhea and her first crew, smiling on the deck of a much newer black ship. Most of those faces were gone now. The cabin lights flickered as Rhea inserted a drive into the console. The hollow screen glowed to life, projecting a set of encrypted coordinates over the table. "We've got a job," she said. Jace raised an eyebrow. "Already? We just crawled out of a storm with half a hull." "Clients don't care about our storms," Rhea replied. "They care about results." The rest of the crew filed in: Mira, the ship's mechanic, with grease still streaked across her cheek; Kai, the quiet navigator who always looked half asleep but saw everything; and 2 newer recruits who still thought danger had a paycheck. Rhea stood at the head of the table, her gloved hands resting on the edge. "The coordinates point to the Rivarian archipelago. A classified zone, restricted by every major faction." Kai frowned. "That place is a graveyard. There's a reason it's off limits." "I know," Rhea said flatly. "Which is why we're going." Mira crossed her arms. "And what exactly are we picking up in a restricted zone?" Ray's eyes darkened. "Not what, who." Target codename: Ashfall. The name hung in the air like a curse. Jace's stomach tightened. He'd heard that name whispered before, in backroom deals, encrypted comms, and drunken confessions from mercenaries who lived too long. Ashfall was a ghost, an assassin who had vanished years ago after wiping out an entire strike team on Vorn Station. No one had ever found a body. "The pay?" Jace asked finally. Rhea tapped the screen. Numbers filled the display. "Even." Mira whistled under her breath. "That's obscene. Enough to rebuild the black ship twice over," Rhea said. "And enough to get us all killed," Jace muttered. "Who's the client?" "Anonymous. Payment verified. I don't ask questions when the money's clean." "Clean money doesn't send us into a dead zone," Kai said quietly. Ray's jaw tightened. "You want clean, you joined the wrong crew." Silence fell again. The only sound was the hum of the engines far below. Everyone knew the captain's rule: once she took a job, there was no turning back. Jace finally sighed and crushed his cigarette against the table edge. "When do we leave?" Rhea looked up at him, her eyes like cold steel. "Now." They dispersed to their stations, the mood shifting from tension to grim resolve. The black ship came alive, its old bones groaning as the engines flared to life. Jace returned to the deck, watching as the fog began to gather around them, thick, unnatural, almost alive. As the vessel cut through the rolling mist toward the Rivarian archipelago, Jace felt something heavy settle in his chest. He'd done hundreds of jobs, but this one felt different. Too quiet, too deliberate. He leaned over the railing, eyes scanning the endless sea. Somewhere out there, in the shadowed waters, waited a name that had outlived legends. Ashfall. He didn't know whether they were going to capture him, rescue him, or die trying. But as the first lightning forked across the far horizon and the ship's hull shuddered against the rising tide, one thought wouldn't leave his mind. Maybe the storm hadn't ended at all. Maybe it was just beginning. By the third day, the black ship had slipped into the fog-choked waters of the Rivarian archipelago, a place that didn't exist on most maps anymore. The sea here was unnaturally still, like glass stretched too thin. The air carried a metallic taste, and even the wind seemed afraid to breathe. The crew had grown quieter with every passing hour. Conversations died before they began. Meals went untouched. The hum of the engines became the only heartbeat left aboard. Jace had been running diagnostics in the engine bay when the radar failed. At first, he thought it was interference. The archipelago was notorious for electromagnetic storms. But when the lights flickered and the entire ship's system rebooted twice, his gut twisted. Something wasn't right. "Captain," he said through the comms, "I'm getting ghost signals. They're faint, but consistent, like echoes following us. Keep an eye on them." Ray's voice came back, steady as ever. "We hold course." "Copy that," Jace muttered, though his hands tightened on the console. When he climbed back up to the deck, the world outside looked wrong. The fog was thicker, turning the horizon into a wall of shifting gray. The sun had vanished hours ago, swallowed whole. Shadows seemed to ripple across the mist, taking shapes that shouldn't exist. Kai stood at the helm, eyes darting across his flickering monitors. "I'm losing navigation. The stars are gone. Compass is spinning like it's drunk." Rhea appeared from below deck, cloak damp with mist, pistol holstered at her thigh. "Manual steering only. We find land, we anchor." "Land," Mira said with a nervous laugh. "In the Rivarian, there's nothing but shipwrecks and myths." The captain's lips curved in something between a smirk and a grimace. "Then we'll find the biggest myth and dock on it." Hours crawled by before the fog finally shifted, revealing a jagged silhouette rising from the water. It wasn't land, it was worse. A massive metal structure jutted from the sea like a grave marker, a fortress built from the bones of ships, submarines, and God knew what else. Rust dripped down its sides like dried blood. Turrets pointed outward, long dead, and thick cables snaked into the water like veins. The place looked alive, but ancient. "That's our destination," Rhea said quietly, eyes locked on the structure. "Signals coming from there." Mira stared at it in disbelief. "That thing's not even supposed to exist." "Neither is Ashfall," Jace said. "And yet, here we are." Rhea gave the order to anchor. The crew prepared the small boarding vessel, securing gear, rifles, and light packs. The atmosphere was heavy, thick with the scent of fear. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. Once they stepped onto that thing, there was no guarantee they'd come back. As the boarding craft scraped against the fortress's corroded hull, a sharp metallic screech cut through the silence. The sound echoed for miles. Birds that weren't really birds, metal-winged drones, half-broken, scattered into the fog. "Lovely welcome," Jace muttered, stepping off first. His boots clanged against the wet steel platform. The surface was slick with oil and sea moss. Every footstep echoed like a whisper. The team advanced carefully. Rhea led, pistol drawn, eyes scanning every shadow. Mira carried the scanner, watching green blips dance on the small screen. Kai brought up the rear, rifle ready. "Power readings," Mira whispered. "Weak but steady. Something's still running in there." They passed through a half-open blast door, entering a corridor that looked like it hadn't seen light in decades. Pipes hissed quietly, dripping black water. The walls were carved with strange symbols, some scratched deep into the metal. Others looked burned in, as if someone had tried to warn whoever came after them. Jace's flashlight beam caught on a word smeared in old blood: silence. Ray's voice was low: "Keep moving." They wound deeper through the corridors, the air growing colder, heavier. A faint hum pulsed through the floor, rhythmic, mechanical, almost like breathing. Then, from ahead, a faint light. Blue, flickering. They followed it into a vast chamber filled with shattered glass tubes and sparking cables. At the center stood a cracked containment pod, surrounded by scorch marks. Inside, or rather, once inside, something had been restrained. Chains hung broken from the ceiling. The name Ashfall was engraved on the metal base, the letters corroded but unmistakable. "Captain," Jace whispered, stepping closer. "Whatever was in there, it got out." Myra's scanner beeped wildly. Energy readings just spiked. "It's not coming from the pod. It's coming from..." Before she could finish, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Then came the sound, slow, deliberate footsteps echoing across the metal floor. One step, then another. Who's there? Rhea called out, weapon raised. We're not here to fight. A voice answered, calm, distorted, chillingly close. Then you shouldn't have come. The fog crept into the chamber through the broken walls, swirling between them. Jace could just barely make out a figure, tall, cloaked, face hidden behind a cracked visor that reflected the flashlight beams. You're Ashfall, Rhea said evenly. The figure tilted his head. That's what they call me. But you don't know who they are, do you? Ray's finger hovered over the trigger. Our job is to bring you in. Alive. The man laughed, low and hollow. Alive. You assume that's still possible. He moved, faster than sight. A flash of light, a sound like thunder, and Kai went down with a cry, his rifle clattering across the floor. Mira screamed. Fire. Rhea shouted, but the bullets only tore through mist and shadow. Ashfall was gone, or everywhere. His voice came from all around them. You were paid to find me. But the job was never yours to complete. Then the lights flickered back on. For just a heartbeat, enough for Jace to see it, carved deep into the steel wall behind the shattered pod. The job was never yours. A tremor shook the floor. Metal screamed. The fortress began to wake. Captain, Jace shouted, grabbing Myra's arm. We need to move, now. But Rhea stood frozen, eyes locked on the message, her face pale beneath the flickering light. For the first time since Jace had known her, Captain Rhea looked afraid. When Jace came to, everything was fire. The world was a blur of smoke, flame, and deafening alarms. His lungs burned as he sucked in air thick with ash and chemical fumes. The metallic taste of blood filled his mouth. The corridor around him was collapsing, panels torn from the ceiling, sparks raining down in a deadly storm. He pushed himself up, coughing, his vision swimming. The last thing he remembered was the explosion, a blinding light, Mira screaming, then nothing. Now the fortress was alive, groaning like some wounded beast. Red emergency lights flickered in the darkness, pulsing like a heartbeat. Captain, he shouted, voice hoarse. Rhea, do you copy? Static. He staggered forward, clutching the wall for balance. Every step echoed, swallowed by the sound of distant gunfire and the hiss of ruptured pipes. He passed through the shattered containment chamber, now just a blackened ruin, and saw the words carved into the wall again, the job was never yours. The letters seemed to glow in the crimson light. A chill crawled up his spine. He found Kai's body halfway down the corridor, eyes open but lifeless. Jace knelt beside him, gently closing his eyelids. I told you this job smelled wrong, he muttered. For a moment, he just sat there, surrounded by the hum of the dying structure, before forcing himself to move. The path to the main deck was a maze of debris and fire. Alarms wailed overhead. Through broken glass panels, he could see the ocean outside, black and roiling, waves hammering the fortress like fists. The whole thing was sinking. Then, through the comms, a voice crackled. Jace. He froze. Captain. Static hissed again, then her voice came clearer, strained but alive. Jace. Get to the ship. Ashfall's. He's not. The signal cut out in a burst of static. Jace didn't wait for more. He sprinted through the smoke-filled hallways, every muscle screaming, the ship's emergency beacon flashing faintly through the fog ahead. The sound of collapsing steel roared behind him. The fortress was breaking apart. When he reached the open deck, rain was pouring, heavy and cold. The black ship hovered just offshore, engines roaring, ready to lift off. But between him and escape stood the captain, an Ashfall. Rhea was on her knees, blood dripping from a wound on her temple, one arm clutching her side. Ashfall towered over her, cloak whipping in the wind. His visor glowed faintly beneath the storm's light, cracked but unyielding. Jace raised his gun. Let her go. Ashfall turned slowly, his voice carrying through the storm. You don't understand. You were never meant to leave here. Try me. Jace's finger tightened on the trigger. The assassin didn't move to attack. Instead, he stepped back slightly, dragging Rhea with him until they stood near the edge of the crumbling deck. You were sent here because they needed the last trace of their mistake erased. Ray's voice was low, pained. You mean you? Ashfall's laughter was hollow. No, Captain, us. The word hung in the air like a curse. Jace frowned, rain dripping into his eyes. What the hell are you talking about? Ashfall looked down at Rhea. Tell him, you've always known what the black ship really was. Rhea shook her head weakly. That's impossible. Ashfall's voice softened, almost human. You think you were. Chosen for your loyalty, for your skill. No, you were chosen because you were made for this ship. Every one of you. They built you, engineered memories, fabricated pasts, layered trauma to keep you obedient. You're not soldiers. You're survivors of a war that never existed. Jace's grip faltered. That's a lie, is it? Ashfall gestured toward the burning fortress behind him. This was the proving ground. The first experiment. I woke up here, just like you, believing I had a purpose. Until I learned what we truly were. Ray's face twisted with pain and doubt. Her voice shook when she spoke. If that's true, why warn us? Because, Ashfall said, stepping closer, they'll come for you next. They can't allow their weapons to remember what they are. Thunder cracked overhead. A chunk of the deck gave way, falling into the sea below. The fortress was dying fast. Jace took a step forward. Then come with us. We'll find answers together. Ashfall looked at him, and for a fleeting second, Jace thought he saw sorrow behind that shattered visor. You can't save me. I was never meant to leave this place. He shoved Rhea toward Jace, who caught her as she stumbled. Then Ashfall reached up, touching the side of his visor. A blue light began to pulse beneath his armor. No, Rhea gasped, realization dawning. He's triggering a meltdown. Ashfall's voice echoed through the storm. Find Black Station. That's where the truth lives. Tell them Ashfall remembers. Then he stepped backward into the fire. The explosion tore through the fortress, a blinding wave of light and sound. Jace threw himself over Rhea as the blast hit, the shockwave launching them toward the edge. He barely managed to grab a rusted railing as the world crumbled beneath them. The next thing he knew, the black ship's boarding line had shot down, wrapping around his arm. Mira, bloodied but alive, was at the controls above, screaming through the comms. Hold on. The line jerked them upward as the fortress collapsed into the sea below, swallowed by flames and darkness. When they finally landed on the deck, Rhea collapsed, coughing and bleeding. The ship's engines roared to full power, lifting away from the inferno. Jace knelt beside her, gripping her shoulder. You're okay. You're alive. She looked up at him, her face pale, eyes distant. He said, Black Station. Yeah, Jace said, and we're going to find it. Rhea stared out at the burning horizon. The reflection of the flames danced in her eyes. For the first time, her voice trembled. What if he was right, Jace? What if we're not who we think we are? Jace hesitated, the question hitting him like a blade. But then he squeezed her hand. Then we find out, and when we do, we decide who we are. The engines roared louder, slicing through the storm. Behind them, the sea swallowed the last remains of the fortress. Ahead, only darkness and the faint promise of truth awaited. As the black ship vanished into the clouds, the name Ashfall echoed in Jace's mind, not as a ghost, but as a warning. The job was over, but the real mission had just begun.